Good afternoon, teacher Rob and classmate. Today we're going to be discussing about my report, and my report is all about protecting Earth's surface. Weathering and erosion may have positive and negative effects on people and on the environment. Positive impacts improve crop yields due to soil information, creation of weathering rock materials and sediments that are used for construction purpose, formation of beautiful rock structures, sand dunes, lakes, and fertile valleys. Negative impacts: floods and landslides which can destroy lives, crops, and properties, damage to monuments, buildings, and other concrete structures, removal of topsoil, reducing the fertilized soil. Human activities that speed up weathering erosion. Carbon emission from vehicles and industrial factories increases the concentration of chemical pollutants in the air. The high concentrations of speed up chemical weathering. Urban development, land clearing, overcultivation, overgrazing, and deforestation exposes rock and soil to weathering and erosion. Mining and quarrying destroy rocks. They also expose rocks to surface to weathering agents. Recreational activities such as hiking, camping, and riding all-terrain vehicles speed up weathering and erosion too. Protecting soil from destructive forces. There are ways to control weathering and erosion. This includes counterplowing, strip cropping, terracing, mulching, and crop rotation and reforestation. Counterplowing. Counterplowing is done by creating plots of crops around the sides of, instead of up and down the hills and mountains. This minimizes slows down runoff due to excessive rainfalls. Strip cropping. Strip cropping is a method of planting two crops in alternative strips. Strip cropping creates a natural dam for water, thus preventing soil erosion. Terracing. Terraces are like structures built on steep sides of hills and mountains. The molded edges of the rain and catch eroding soil to prevent the formation of gullies. Mulching. Mulching involves covering the ground with fallen twigs and dry leaves to protect the forest floor from rushing water, lessen the impact of rainfall. Crop rotation. Crop rotation is a method of planting different crops in the fields each season within a year. Crops such as peanuts and other legumes improve soil fertility. But before I continue my report, I would love to show you a video about the difference between weathering and erosion.
What are the differences between weathering and erosion? Think of it this way. If you break up a rock into a bunch of tiny little pieces, the rock has gone through the process of weathering. After you break up the rock, you might hold some of the rock pieces in your hand and blow them away. The movement of the rock pieces from your hand to somewhere else is the process of erosion. Here's another example. Beach coastlines are constantly weathering. When the salty sea crashes against the coast's rocks and sand, the rocks and sand then go through the process of erosion when they're carried away by wind and water. This constant process of weathering and erosion along the coastline can create or destroy all kinds of new landforms like bays, caves, sea cliffs, and coastal dunes. Weathering. There are three main types of weathering. The first is chemical weathering. Chemical weathering causes changes to the minerals inside or on the surface of a rock. This process happens through chemical reactions. Second is mechanical weathering. Mechanical weathering is
Reforestation. Different organizations are working together to rehabilitate denuded areas through reforestation, which prevents soil erosion because roots of trees bind the soil together. Quick fun fact: plants help prevent erosion. Breaks rock down. Farmers and other people engaged in farming activities must be educated on correct farming practices. Loggers and miners must be properly informed and trained since any misuse of lands may lead to serious consequences. I'm gonna be giving you a question. If you really listen, you will be able to answer my question easily. Raise your hand, no looking to notes or book. You will be divided into groups. If your group answered it correctly, then write your points to a paper. If one group lost or they got lower score, they'll get eaten by nothing. So these are the groups. The girls don't mind the girls and the boys. They're nothing. So this is group 1, Georgina, Raiko, and Alex. This is group 2, Kiel, Sancho, and Piper. I'll at least give you 5 seconds to answer. Number 1. This is done by creating plows of crops around the sites. A. Counter plowing. B. Mulching. C. Strip cropping. D. Crop rotation. The answer is letter A. Counter plowing. Number 2. True or false? There are no ways to control weathering and erosion. The answer is false. Number 3. True or false? Farmers and other people engaged in farming activities must be educated on correct farming practices. The answer is true. Mining and quarrying destroy rock. The answer is true. Flood and floods and landslide cannot destroy lives, crops, and properties. The answer is false. Thank you. Before I end my report, I would love to show you the difference between weathering or what is weathering.
How do weathering and erosion shape Earth's surface? The process of rock breaking apart is called weathering. Many things cause weathering. The dropping of weathered rock by wind or moving water is known as deposition. Slow-moving water has less energy than fast-moving water has. Thus, as water in a river continues to slow down, more bits of weathered rock are dropped. Slow-moving water carries only very small pieces of rock, such as sand and silt, called sediment. When rivers reach the ocean, they slow down even more and sediment is dropped. Over time, the sediment forms a landform called a delta. A landform is a natural land shape or feature. Weathering and erosion by wind change landforms. Wind can carry sediment from place to place. When wind deposits a lot of sand in one area, sand dunes form. Wind sweeps up one side of a dune and lifts sand from its surface. Gravity pulls the sand down the other slope. Blowing sediment can also cause changes to other landforms as particles collide with exposed rock to form interesting shapes. For instance, mushroom rocks and arches are formed by water but shaped by the wind. Eventually, gravity pulls these formations down. Huge sheets of ice are called glaciers and are found in very cold places. Gravity pulls glaciers downhill, picking up soil, rocks, and boulders beneath the glacier and pushing boulders against the ground below. When the glacier melts, the rock and sediment it carried downhill drop out and form different land features, including hills called moraines. A huge glacier once covered most of Canada and the northern United States. The ice cut deep grooves that formed the Great Lakes. Moving water causes weathering and erosion by picking up sediment, which scrapes against the bottom and sides of the riverbed. This carves out deep canyons, which are gorges between cliffs of rock. Deposits of sediment can change the direction of river water. Curves in a river's path can produce different landforms. Ocean waves weather cliffs, eroding pieces of rock and depositing them into new places, forming caves in shoreline cliffs. The sediment from eroding shorelines becomes fine sand, and beaches are formed at the water's edge. In the early 1900s, families in the Central Plains of the United States made a living farming land where natural grasses once grew. In between crop seasons, loose soil was left exposed to wind. During the 1930s, the plains experienced severe drought. The soil turned to fine, dry dust, and high winds caused giant dust storms. These dust storms stripped away much of the soil that made the region good for farming. Families moved away to find other ways to survive. They suffered hard times. The region became known as the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl teaches a valuable lesson about erosion problems caused by removing all the plants from an area. Now farmers plant different crops at different times to keep soil covered year-round. Fences and lines of trees are planted to break the wind, and plants are added to hillsides to protect soil from water erosion and wind. We hope you learned something.
Thank you so much for cooperating to the question and for listening. Well, I hope you learned something new and you learned a lot. Thank you. Bye bye.